Hi, everybody.
Hey Rachel, you look very fashionable today.
Thank you. I don't know. I feel like Mother's Day. We go to church in the morning, so
Yeah,
I was just like, yeah, and
nice.
kind of chilly.
It's a
So
little cooler today. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. We planted, we had brunch. Happy Mother's Day to
yeah.
those for whom it applies. We had brunch with my mom, and then two of my kids are home, two are at school, and so we planted the garden. So yesterday we got all the vegetables. Yesterday and the day before, all the seedlings and everything, and we were out there putting them in the ground today, and it was a little chilly, but I think they'll be okay. So yeah,
Where
Nice.
are you located in Michigan?
I'm in the suburbs of Detroit, Huntington Woods.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Where are you, Bonnie?
I'm in Pennsylvania,
Okay. Yeah.
Lancaster. Mhm.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. My mother-in-law is from there. So
That's right. Yes, we did say that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, she lives in DC now, but that's where she grew up, and they have a lot of
Oh,
family there. So
oh,
yeah. And Rachel's just down the road from me. So
yeah, that's right.
we have yet to meet in person, so that has to happen at some point. So
It does. My girlfriend actually texted me today, and she's like, "We really need to do like a writing retreat." And I was like, "Actually, um, the teacher for my writing classes, she hosts them sometimes, so maybe we could do one of hers." So
I love it. Well, I do Mackinac every year, Mackinac Island, and that's in September. So I don't know for teaching if that's good for you. This is probably
yeah.
a tough time. But like this year, I'm doing one in Nova Scotia in the last week of July, and I I don't have spots, but I make spots available for favorite students. So, but that is far, and it's whatever. But like every year I do two. So this year it's Nova Scotia and Mackinac Island. Every year I do Mackinac. So in 2024 I'm doing right in the redwoods. So in the Northern California, it's going to be amazing. It's this
My
great
God.
and it's just going to be, and then hiking in the redwoods, and oh, it's going to be fantastic.
When is that?
That'll be the last week of October in 2024.
Okay, I'm texting her right now.
That
Okay.
sounds
That
nice.
sounds,
Yep.
that sounds like amazing.
Yeah, we'll start promoting it in September of this year, and I think it's going to sell out right away because it's such a great location and it's going to be a phenomenal retreat. So if you want to come, I want you there. It'd be
Yeah.
great.
Well, I signed up for the one in Mackinac in
Yay!
September, so I'm excited about that.
Oh, Bonnie, I can't wait to meet you in person. That'll be so great.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome.
I
Awesome.
used to work on Mackinac Island because
Yeah.
I grew up in Sheboygan,
Okay.
Okay.
so really close to, and
Hmm.
so I worked in the city and on the island at the Kilwins.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Fun.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, Mackinac Island, the writers retreat is phenomenal. It's I've been doing it since 2015 and it's just so great because it's such a beautiful place and with no motor traffic on the island, it's at night it is so peaceful and it's
Peaceful.
after the summer season. So even though it does get really busy there, during the week in September, it's quiet and it's nice.
Okay,
And so we have the
good.
island, more to ourselves, but we do have opportunities to hike, bike, and kayak for those
Hmm.
who want it. And we do lots of writing and it's really nice. So Bonnie, I'm glad you're coming. That'll be great.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
I think I may have shared with you, I have some family that live
Yeah.
in the Empire area near Traverse City, not too far from there. And so I've been up there many times. It's actually my husband's family. So I haven't been up in a while. So I thought this would be a good time to do that.
Nice. I'm so
Mm.
glad you're coming. And then
Yeah.
after, just so you guys know, after you've been in a class of mine, I give 10% discount to my returning students in perpetuity. So anything you do with me going forward, you'll get the 10% discount. And so like if you want to do Right in the Redwoods or whatever it is, you'll get that. So just
That's nice.
always ask about it because it's nice to have a little savings. So.
Yeah, that's
Well,
great.
hi everybody. Happy Mother's Day, and thank you for being here. I know we have 2 hours today. I don't know if we're going to get everybody, but we are recording, so those who don't make it will be able to see. And so we're going to work on week 3 and week 4 today, and move ahead. And then, the next 2 weeks we are not meeting because I will be overseas working on my next book, and then we'll be back June 4th. So, and then we'll have the whole month of June to finish out all of the 8 sessions. So I want to start by asking, how's it going? What wins do you have to celebrate? What questions do you have? Fill me in on where things are going with planning your book, writing your book, wherever you are in the process.
I can start. I've been working on, I have a lot of pages that are already written, but I'm going back and just really fleshing out a lot of work and trying to bring one of the things that you talked about last week, Lynn, was the interiority and how to, bring that back into the story and how to bring my reader into the story as well. So I've been working a lot on that this past week.
Nice. Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah. A lot of
Well,
work to do though.
there always is, and we can talk about how do we know when it's done, and when, so we can talk about that in a little bit too. I want to hear from other people. What's going on? What's your progress? What's your struggle? Who wants to go next?
So I started my sorry Kathleen.
No, that's okay.
I started my second chapter. My first one was we talked about the Law and Order SVU where she's in the hotel, the prostitute's in the hotel with, unbeknownst to now, I mean, she knows it's her dad, but the reader doesn't know. And then going through that whole murder scene. So I've done that already. Second chapter is now a flashback and talking about her childhood and all that stuff, but the reader doesn't get the connection yet between the lady in the first chapter versus the child in the second.
Okay. All right, cool. Excellent. Moving along. That's great, Jordan.
Thank you.
Kathleen, did you want to go next?
Sure. I have not been so successful. I keep changing my mind. I'm doing the morning pages,
Okay.
and I've been religious about that, but I'm trying to flush out what I really want to do with my story.
Okay.
I read examples of the second person and narrative and that you gave me, and it was like, oh, that's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really understand it. I like how it sounds, but I don't really understand how you can just be so consistent with that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure that one out.
Hmm.
And
Talk about it a little and maybe try to work it out here.
maybe.
Okay. If you do, it's perfect. We like to do coaching in the class. So
Right. I just feel like I have way too many ideas in my head, and
okay.
I think I'm a pantser.
Okay.
So
No
even
problem.
though I say, I'm going to write these days, I will, write a blurb where I'm trying to flesh something out, but I'm not really writing. I do a lot of dialogue.
So,
So,
okay. Writing time includes anything that goes into getting a book done. And that could be thinking, and that could be research, and that could be reading something else to decide how you want to go about it. So, but I want to say, pantsing is not just writing whenever you feel like it. Pantsing means you don't plan out the novel or the book. Plotting means you plan it out. Pantsing means you
okay.
sit down and you're like, what comes next? Well, let's do it now, So, and there's tons of pantsers in the world. But both plotters and pantsers benefit from committing to a writing schedule. And,
Mhm.
I fought that for like decades. Like I did my MFA in creative writing in my 20s. And even then I was like, no, I don't need a schedule. I don't need to commit to it. I'll write. I'll just do it. And I did, but it was really fits and starts. And so I
Okay.
found that when it was really important to me and I made it a priority, even just like an hour before work, way before I got back into, writing my novels, I was way more productive, and then it sort of feeds itself. So like,
Okay.
I woke up Monday morning at, it was 5 a.m. at the time, and then I woke up Tuesday, and then I woke up Wednesday, and by Thursday I was like so excited to be there. But it was hard at times. And so that commitment is actually like a promise to yourself. And so, and lots of us are not good at honoring those commitments to ourselves. And
Yeah.
so that's a very different thing than pantsing. Pantsing, it just means you don't want to do an outline or character development ahead of time or any of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
All right.
I feel,
I guess I'm misunderstood that.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I start with a plan, and then I think, I go for a walk, and then I'm thinking about what my plan is, And I think, oh, I don't want to do that. So that, I mean, I'm giving up before I really start. That's what I'm doing. I'm writing lots of things. I'm thinking lots of things, but it's like, I don't want to put my pen to my page to really commit to this.
So Kathleen, let me
So,
ask you why. Why do you think that when you come up with an idea, you discard it quickly? Like, why do you think?
um, I I didn't really plan it as I'm writing it. I mean, it's like what I'm writing is not exactly what I did in the plan. That
Okay,
makes sense.
sure.
And then I also don't want to fail
Okay,
at
that's
where it's going.
yep.
It's like, well, I planned this, but it's going somewhere else. And I know how that works,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I feel like this is a huge project. And I've been, writing poetry and writing plays.
Yep.
So I feel like those are a lot more sparse.
So that's great. That's all really great stuff. So a couple things. Even people who plot out their books like to the nth degree, it changes as they start writing. And so they
Right.
write, and then, like I've shown you guys, you make those changes. Okay, great. It went in this direction. No problem. How am I rerouting the story? And you sort of have to surrender to the story. Sometimes the story takes you in a new direction, and you can decide, do I like this or do I want to stay the course? And you get to choose, but you can go in that other direction. You can give
Yeah.
yourself permission to see where the story takes you.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two is writing a book is hard. Why do you think this is an 8-week course? And it's not even long enough, right? So
Right.
let's talk a little bit about the I don't want to fail. So tell me how would you define failure?
As not finishing something.
Not finishing something. Okay.
Yeah. I
What would
mean,
happen if you didn't finish something? What would happen really?
guilt.
Okay.
Guilt would happen.
Can you live with guilt?
No.
No? You never have any guilt that you live with? Ever?
No, I mean it can I live with guilt? No, that's the stress in my life.
Okay. So if you can't live with guilt, then what it sounds like is that you don't want to get started because you don't want to fail because you don't want that guilt, right?
Yeah.
But a book doesn't happen overnight. It happens in time. It takes a lot of time. And
Okay.
it's like a little bit like a page a day. Like, oh, can I write a page today? Oh, I can do
Okay.
that. And I've succeeded at that. Like setting smaller goals helps you
Hmm.
complete the bigger goal. And so would there be a way into this book that could help you feel more comfortable with it? So it's not this huge big thing, but it's this little teeny thing that you can do and then it goes to another teeny thing. Is there like a way that you could chunk it out so that you have little successes every day that could lead you to the bigger success?
I know that you said last time that we should start small,
Yeah.
like the page. And I didn't start small. I was like, okay, I want to do 2 hours a day because it can be thinking,
Yeah.
and just recently I thought, well, I'm supposed to start small. Should I change that?
Yeah. Why not?
But do I want to change it? No. I'm sorry. This seems like a therapy session for me.
We'll go on to somebody else in a couple of minutes, but I just think it's helpful for everyone because we all go through these things. And this fear of failure, and it's actually interesting, for the past week in all of my classes, this has been coming up, and which is so interesting because I always feel like the universe sends you messages again and again when you need to hear them. Like just yesterday, I was at a garage sale with my daughter, and this woman, she had all these cool t-shirts out for like $2. And she's like, I just have to make peace with the fact that these t-shirts don't fit me anymore and they're ready to move on to somebody that they fit. And I'm like, and I just tried on a dress Friday night that did not fit me anymore. And I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, I should just give it away, right? So the
Hmm.
universe is telling me, get rid of the clothes that don't fit you and make peace with your body. Like, okay, thank you. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
same thing with this. Like, in the past week, every single writing session I've had, we've talked about what are the fears that we face as writers. Fear of being rejected, fear of people not liking your writing, fear of never getting published, fear of not finishing, fear of failure, so many that all of us experience. And so it's really important to name the fear and address it and really look at, what is the worst thing that happens if I write? And what is the
Yeah.
worst thing that happens if I don't write? And those are really important answers. So I would just leave you with that, Kathleen. I encourage
you.
you to journal in your morning pages about what is the worst thing that happens if you write, and what is the worst thing that happens if you don't write, and just see what comes out. And I'd love to hear.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Yes. Who else wants to check in about the progress you're making? Rachel or Lisa?
I can
I'll
check
check in
in.
because I'm so related to so much of what you were saying, Kathleen. Um, I am a pantser, and I would like to change that, but and I feel like I could change that. But the situation with my book is that I have been working on it on and off and on and off for 5 years.
Uh-huh.
By the seat of my pants. I feel like writing about this. I feel like writing about that. So I have a lot of stuff. And yet from different years, with slightly different voices, with,
Mhm.
perspectives. And I end up getting just kind of like overwhelmed. It's like this giant pile of clothes, and I have to put them in order, and I can't.
Yep.
I'll share that the one thing I felt was a success for me this week was setting
Does somebody have music in the background? I feel like I hear.
Siri, turn it off. Hey Siri.
Hey Siri, turn it off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, I set aside time. I put it on my calendar.
Hey.
And for the most part honored that.
That's
And
great.
allowed that to be whatever it was,
Uh-huh.
whether it's looking through old things I've written, whether it's jotting down ideas. But it was like, and I asked myself the question, which you suggested to us, what's my best time of day?
Yeah.
I had always been leaving, oh, maybe I'll write at, 4 after I've done everything else
Mhm.
I need to do. Well, that doesn't work because I'm
You're
not
tired.
tired.
Yeah.
So I set aside my best time of day for 3 days.
Uh-huh.
And what I found myself doing was going into some of these pieces that I haven't seen in a long time.
Mhm.
And, with trepidation because maybe they suck or, what it's like, and for the most part, I'd be a little bit pleasantly surprised, like, oh, this is okay. This is kind of good. And then I would start getting picky about it. Like, maybe it should be it apostrophe S instead of it is,
That's
Or
what you hire an editor for when you're done writing.
I know, but that's where I go. I go down, 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 down to the tiniest little crumb of detail. And have a hard time pulling back to a bigger picture. So that's one problem. And another problem is that I'll be reading along something I wrote quite a while ago, and it flows pretty well. I worked it pretty well at the time. And then I think, it never occurred to me, I'd also like to say this right here. So I start adding that in, whatever the new this is.
Mhm.
But then it no longer flows from where, the old part to where the old part starts again.
Yep.
I get like, it's time for lunch.
So Lisa, what I'm hearing you say is that you were successful in putting aside the writing time, which is amazing. That's so great. You're absolutely right in your assertion that when we leave writing for like the last thing, we're too tired and exhausted and worn out. And it's also almost hurtful to ourselves because it's like the thing we want most, we're never prioritizing. We're putting last. And this is a class of women as well. And one of the things that happens with a lot of women is that we were raised to put everybody else first. And it's really hard to unlearn that. Maybe not everyone, but I've seen it a lot with women in writing is that, okay, it's finally time for me to write. It's finally time in my life to write. The other thing that what you said sparked is I've had a number of students who've been working on a book for like 5 or 10 years. And so I always ask them, and this is a rhetorical question for you if you want to think about it, you know, what do you think might be the reason for the delay? Because like one of my students, for example, she's a beautiful writer and she's writing a novel and she has a whole vision of like a series of novels. This is the first in it. And she's been working on it for 5 years. And I know her really well by now, and she's terrified of actually putting it out in the world. So, and it's like an unconscious thing, but as I've worked with her over the years, that's what's come to the surface, is that like she, of course, wants to finish the book and put it out there, but then she doesn't want to do any of the business of it. And she's really terrified of like, what if nobody buys it? What if nobody likes it? And so sometimes that's at play. So I would definitely invite you to think about like, what is it? Like,
I do think about that, and that's a really good question. So some of what has gotten in the way of the sort of the big flow has been things like COVID, things like health crises in my own life, things that just interrupted life to the point where that wasn't happening at the time. But yeah, I have spent my career working in the music business, which is very judgmental and very competitive. And the thought of, I'm terrified to put something out and have someone else say, what the hell is this?
So here's the thing. There are going to be people who hate what you write, and there are going to be people who love it.
Exactly.
That's always going to happen. Does everybody like you? Not everybody likes me. There are people who definitely have issues with me. And it's like, what can I do about it? Like if I know that I am doing my best, I can't do anything about their feelings. Mm-hmm. And so there are going to be people who don't like your writing. Can you live with that? There will probably be way more people who do like it. Mm-hmm. But, I know tons of authors who get negative reviews and it's crushing, but hey, somebody read it. And the way I look at it is, because I worked in PR for a long time, all PR is publicity. And so, if somebody read your book and disliked it enough to leave a review, that obviously sparked some passion in them. And I actually have coached some fellow writers on how to respond, because even when somebody leaves like a 1-star review on Amazon, I'm like, you should write to them and be like, thank you so much for caring enough to write a review. I really appreciate it. Or, hey, I hear your concerns. Let's have a conversation. They always change it. It's just a lot of times when people have negative feedback, it's because something's going on with them and they just want to be heard.
Yeah, I'm just trying to avoid the pain before.
Yep. But I understand it. But I mean, something to think about, right? But I'm so proud of you for writing 3 days. That's amazing. It's awesome. Rachel, you've been so patient. Do you want to go and check in?
Sure. So I think that what happens is that because like for my writing, like I feel like writing a book is constantly haunting me. Like I feel like it's constantly on my mind that I have to do it. But I just feel like I just don't do it because it seems so difficult and so hard. And then the last 2 weeks, I've really been like, no, I'm just going to write. I'm just going to write. And in the past 2 weeks, I've written 7,000 words. And
that's amazing.
It just sort of like flowed so easily, because it's also like this book is like a lot based on my life. So it's very therapeutic, and I'm really grieving the loss of my friend because of my sobriety. So it's like really trying to understand her more and like leave space for her too. So it's not just like this other character. She's like someone that I deeply love, and so it's like sort of like this very therapeutic time for me. Mm-hmm. So it's been so good. And I think that we overthink like, this is so hard. It's like working out, right? Like, oh God, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And then you do it and you're like, I like rule the world. Like I am the most amazing person. That's how I felt after I've tried to write like 1,000 words whenever I sit down. Like sometimes it takes me like a half hour and I'm like, I am the coolest, most brilliant person in the world. It's been like very like I'll be like, oh, this is so hard. I don't want to do it. And then I do it and I'm like, wow, like I can do this. Like, it's giving me the most confidence because it's like, I think we just get really in our heads. And then once we do it, we're like, wow, that feels really good. Like, so just doing it, it's just doing it. That's the hard part. It's like working out. It's like, you don't want to do it. It's like, this sucks and it's going to be painful. But then I get through it and I'm like, I'm amazing, you know? So it's like, that's what you have to look for. You have to be like, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to do it. It's going to be painful. It's going to suck. But then afterwards, I'm going to walk away and I'm going to feel good about it. Even if my writing wasn't the best, because I've been writing like notes like this needs to be fixed. And then I highlight it in yellow, or do I need to add something here for like the future? Because I was getting a little stuck. Like I would go back and reread everything and then start writing again.
Yep.
And like that really would like mess up my flow.
Yep.
So yeah, maybe that will help you guys because I haven't been able to like start my writing. I've outlined a few things, but I was like, no, I'm going to start this. I know the story in my head. It haunts me every day. I can do this.
That's
And
awesome.
I'm just going to write it. So it's been a really good couple of weeks of writing and I feel very confident in myself. My confidence is like soaring because I don't let my excuses get in my way anymore because it is a haunting thing. Like I'm like, just get it done, just do it already, like you get in the way of your own self half the time. And then you're like, why did I do that? Or complicate things too much. Just do it. And it's not going to be pretty at first, right? Like Lynne, you say that it's not going to be great.
Messy first drafts. All first drafts are messy, you guys.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to get it done because I think let's just do it, like.
Well, I love it. Congratulations. Yay. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
And for the rest of you guys, I think I've said this before, but a page a day is a book a year. A page is 300 words, you guys. And you can do that. And chances are if you say, I'm just going to do one page today, that's all I'm going to write, double spaced, one page. And chances are good that by the time you get to the end of the page, you're like, no, I just got to keep going. I just got to finish this, And so all of a sudden you do 3 pages, which is, 1,000 words like Rachel did, or maybe it's 4 pages or whatever. But a page a day is so doable. 2 pages is doable. So think about those little wins. And I love that you just said, I'm going to just do it. I'm going to sit down and do it. And that you're letting it be messy. So first drafts are messy. I just finished the first draft of my second novel. And it's a mess, you guys. And I actually have in some places I've either highlighted or I put in all caps, do the research here or, work on this character or something. It's messy, but it is so much easier to edit and revise something that's already on the page than it is to fill a blank page. And so let it be ugly, let it be messy, because you can always go back and perfect it. So that's awesome. You guys all, thank you for sharing where you are. Don't feel discouraged. This is a big project. And by the way, you don't have to do it. You want to do it. You signed up for this class because you want to write a book, because you have something really interesting, compelling that you're passionate about, that you want to put in the world that people will benefit from. And so when you get down, remember that. Give yourself that pep talk, okay? So let's start talking a little bit about creating compelling characters, because there are always characters in a book, even if they're real people, even if this is, a true story, there are characters. And I will say, I think fiction characters are easier because you get to make them up out of thin air. And real living, breathing people, we don't know in the 360-degree way that we do the characters we create. So it can be harder when it's nonfiction, but you still want to think about the characters. So let's talk a little bit about it. And I'm gonna share the screen, and we're just gonna look at. Well, am I going to? Let me first talk a little bit about the characters, and I'll share the screen and show you a couple slides. But if we think about it this way, every book is about something happening to someone, and likely more than one someone's, right? So something happening to a person or between people. So the question I have for you is, who are the characters in your book? What's happening to whom, right? So that's something to figure out, to think about. And then my next question would be, do you know them better than anyone else? Because you should, because you are the master puppeteer in this situation. You're creating the book, so you should know your characters better than anyone. So it helps me to take notes on my characters, and there actually is in the drive in week 3, 2 things. I will share my screen to show you these. So there's a character development questionnaire. And so this is in the week 3 folder in the Google Drive. And these are questions to ask yourself about every single character. And you guys, there's a lot. There's like 20 questions. And my suggestion is that you make a copy of this for every character that you're going to be writing about. And you just go through and you look at them. So, for example, I like to reference one of my favorite authors, Diana Gabaldon, who wrote Outlander. When you think of birthday, it only comes up once in the 9 books that she's written in the Outlander series, Jamie's birthday, but she knows it. And it becomes actually a marketing tool for her. So when she's marketing these books, she can do social media posts on whatever day it is that's her main character's birthday and be like, 300 some whatever years ago, Jamie Fraser was born or whatever. And it becomes like a thing. But it only comes up once in the books. And I think it's still important to know because you have to know these characters better than anybody else. So they're just things to think about, And then the other tool that is in the drive is this handout, creating compelling characters. And so we're going to go through some of this and take a look at it, but you guys can also pull it down if you want in there. But they're just some ways to make your characters more believable. But you have to know them really first before the reader can. If you're writing a memoir or nonfiction, the writer needs to transform from seeing the real people as people in your life that you know from a very biased perspective to seeing them as multifaceted characters. So, if I'm, for example, Mother's Day, if I write about my mom, I only know her as a daughter. I don't know her as a peer. I don't know her, I don't know her insecurities. I don't know any of that because we don't have that relationship. So if I want to make her a character in a book, I have to really understand her from all angles. So how would I do that? And week 4, which we're going to get to in a few minutes, is all about research. And so if I was going to do that, I might talk to my aunts. I might talk to my mom's friends. I might, even read, letters or go through photo albums or something so that I could get another perspective than the one that I have that can be limited. So when it's nonfiction, you really need to know the characters well. And if you only know them from one perspective, it's important to do that research to figure out who they are from all angles. Okay, so let's talk about how we create compelling characters. So, a book consists of a character interacting with events over time, or a human interacting with events over time. So character and plot are interwoven. And the reader must really understand the character and know them as a 3-dimensional person, their values, their fears, the way they pronounce certain words. Like, it needs to be different than anybody else. Each character needs to be a unique individual in order to understand the significance of this character to the events that are happening, the way that the plot's unfolding. So, I'm sure you guys know these terms, but you have protagonist, antagonist, main character, and there can be more than one, depending on how many points of view. And then your antagonist is somebody who opposes that protagonist. It can be a bad guy. It can be their nemesis, whatever it is. Rachel, I would think that the friend is the antagonist, maybe. And yeah, okay. So you have to think about, what is this dance that they're doing and how do you create them? And the interesting thing is that to be believable, they both have to have flaws and they both have to be likable in some way. Like, you can't have an all bad villain because then there's like no stakes in the story. And there's like everybody just wants them out. So there has to be a reason, because most bad people are not all bad. They might be mostly bad, but there's still something human in them, some kind of emotion. It's very rare to have a totally, totally bad person. Kathleen, you had a question?
Can the antagonist be a dead person?
Sure, why not? Absolutely. It can be somebody who
Okay.
haunts you or somebody who you never made peace with, or 100%.
Okay.
I think
Okay,
there's a
good.
lot of those actually, like, oh, why didn't I ever resolve this when they were living? Yeah, totally.
Okay, good.
Too.
Thanks.
Then there's secondary characters. So secondary characters are not essential for the story, but they should have some kind of an important role. They can't just be there. They have to matter. And when I do developmental edits on manuscripts for clients, I make a list of all their characters, the way I encounter them in the book. And I did one, this was a book that a guy wrote, and it was, I'm not joking, 500 pages, double spaced, 12-point font. Yeah, it was way too long. And I told him that from the beginning. And I said, I'm going to do my best to edit out a lot of it, but you got to get it down. Like it was twice as long as a novel today usually is. And so I made a list of his characters, and I said, well, you got a lot of characters going on, and it's going to be hard for the reader to keep track. It was hard for me to keep track, and this was a job of mine, you know? So you want to make sure that when you have secondary characters, they add to this story. There's a reason that they're there. And it sometimes helps to do a visual, like almost like those little circles with the lines between them to show how the characters are connected to one another. Sometimes I've given advice, and I see this in books as well. If there's a secondary character that comes in that really isn't going to come back in the story or doesn't necessarily matter to the story, but they're like a police officer stops the main character on the road and gives them a ticket. And maybe that police officer is never going to show up again. Maybe they don't need to have a name. Maybe it's just the police officer, because they're not necessarily essential to the story. And so that can be one way to resolve too many characters. So how do we develop the main character, the protagonist? Well, you want to give them flaws. So there has to be, good to them, but also they can't be perfect. In fact, if they're perfect, they're probably going to be boring. And so you want them to be believable. And so that real people have flaws and they have depth. And so what do they worry about? What are they insecure about? What are they arrogant about? What are they really good at? What are they bad at? Those are things that you want to keep in mind to make a main character believable. You also want your main character to go through a transformation from beginning of the story to the end. And so there's a change, they start here and they end up there, or they transform in some way. They start insecure, they become confident, or, they're looking for love, they end up finding it, or they end up married, or whatever it is. Main characters that don't change, it's really hard to understand what you're hoping for, what you're rooting for as a reader. And you can do it, but if they don't experience any change, make it an intentional decision that does move the story along. I can't imagine a story where the main character doesn't change in some way. There isn't some transformation by the end. There's also, it's really important to think about, so you have this character or multiple characters or whatever, and what are they working toward? So you can boil these down really simply. Like, I'll go back to Outlander. Has anybody read it or seen it? Oh my God, you really should. So Outlander, the books are phenomenal. The show on Netflix, it's actually on Stars, but it's on Netflix now. It's good, and we discovered it during COVID, and it was fun, but the books are phenomenal, and they're really big too. But and what's interesting is that, and maybe this is helpful for some of you who are struggling, Diana Gabaldon, when she started writing Outlander in the 80s, she was a college professor, mother of 3 little kids, did a side job as a technical writer, and she's like, I think I'm going to try to write a novel. And she literally did it from midnight to 4 a.m. It was the only time she had to do it because she had all these other jobs. And she just was like, can I do this? And it's like world famous. And now she's working on the 10th book. And but she just did it to like prove to herself. But anyway, in the first book, it's a time travel book, and it's anyway, the whole thing is that the 20th century character at first is trying to get back to the 20th century. She fell back through time. And then when she falls in love in the 18th century and she keeps getting separated from Jamie, the story arc is they're just trying to get back to each other. And so it's that simple. What is at stake? What are they trying to do? She's trying to get back through time. She's trying to get to the guy. And you see what happens as they're on that journey. And so I encourage you to think about, what is the story arc in your book? What is the starting point? What is the ending point going to be? And what's going to happen on the way there? If you think about Cheryl Strayed's memoir, which I'm forgetting the name, but she was hiking. Does anybody remember the name Cheryl Strayed's memoir?
Wild.
Thank you. Yes. Yep. Wild. So she's at this point of despair. She lost her mother. Terrible things were happening. She said she was going to hike the Pacific Coast Trail, I think it is. And, you know, there's revelations, there's transformation. It's very hard, all these obstacles. And at the end, she's like reborn. She's like a new person. She's like done this hard thing and she comes back to herself and she feels like all is not terrible again. And it's a huge, you know, personal transformation. So it doesn't have to be a really deep theme. It's just where do we start and where are we going and why? Like and then what happens along the way? And that's really what we want to look at. So that's the arc. Now, when you're developing, any questions, by the way, so far? No? Okay.
I have a question about character names.
Yeah.
Should that be now or later?
Yeah, go for it. Let's do it.
So I know with a lot of books, like authors name things for a specific reason. Should all characters have a name with an underlying meaning?
It doesn't, they don't have to, but it's really nice when you can. And so, like for my novel that's coming out in the fall, I don't have answers for all the characters as to why I chose their names. And actually, my best friend asked me why I named the main character what I did. And I don't have a good reason for it. But the other characters I did. For the next novel, I started really researching names because it starts in, some of it's in the 1980s, some of it's in Scotland, some of it's in Michigan. And so I wanted like Scottish names. I wanted last names that evoked something. Like I really did some research into names of the time, like in the 80s. If somebody was born in the 80s, what were the common names? And, you know, so I think it can be really special and meaningful when you put some thought into the character names and you do a little bit of research and there's a strategy behind it. It's also really important to make sure that you don't have any overlap with names. So what's interesting, I was writing an essay, this is not a book, but I was writing a creative nonfiction essay. And it was it's something that really happened in my life. And it was, I had a boyfriend named John, and then there was a nun that I had met named Sister John Paul. And these were their names. And my critique group was like, it's really confusing that you have John and Sister John Paul. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do because this is factual. Now I can change it if I want to, because you can, you know, but I felt very like faithful to the truth of it. But in fiction, for sure, and if ever you can in nonfiction, you don't want to have names that are too close together because it's very confusing for readers. So when you're really strategic about the names that you choose, it helps to avoid that. Does that help, Jordan?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions at this point? Yeah, Lisa.
I'm finding this really interesting and wondering, can the character be the reader in a book like mine? Like, could I say, you know, here's the starting point of this reader. What transformation is going to happen to this reader as they read through this book?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Sumptuous, or is that too like, maybe I'm going to make other readers feel like, well, this isn't about me, you know, I don't relate to this.
Yeah. I mean, in how-to books or books about process, usually, well, not usually, often writers will include anecdotes or case studies of people who've experienced it to give examples.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to do that, or if that isn't practical for what you're writing,
It is. I did it.
yeah, I think, but you can also set that apart. You could have the main theme, the main structure of the book be speaking to the reader and the reader as a character, and then you could have like boxes that have case studies and they're labeled as such so that it's like obviously separate.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Anybody else have a question? Okay. So when you develop your antagonist, your bad guy, your villain, whatever, you still want to make them moral. Like they can't just be like depraved and like completely out of their minds. You want to know what motivation is in this antagonist for creating a conflict with your main character. Like why? Why are they fighting with them? Why are they leaving them out? Why are they persecuting them? Like you want to understand it. Even if their morality is messed up, let them have a sound reasoning for doing what they do. It may be kind of kooky, but like at least to them, it should make sense. So if it's a murderer, if it's a zombie, if it's a vampire, the reader needs to know why they believe in the way they're behaving. What is motivating their actions. So it sounds weird, but you still have to have some morals in them, like some logic in their head for what they're doing, even if it doesn't make sense. You also need to give them power. So this opposing character has to have some power that threatens the main character, because your reader should be on the side of the main character. But it shouldn't be easy. It should be like, wow, they're really facing some big challenges. And so you want your antagonist to be, a real foe for the hero or the heroine. Maybe even at times they have more power over them, so that it's really this contest is really believable. And then that could also force the main character to go through some of the transformation, to build skills, to gather resources, so that they can come out victorious. So the bad guy, can't be like a wimp. Can't be like, oh, this is so not important. Like, you're gossiping about me. Fine. I don't, whatever. I can get over that. It needs to be real. So then there's secondary characters. So secondary characters obviously are not the main characters, but they should complement. So think about any of the animated movies that you've loved. Like, there's always a sidekick, like there's the princess has, somebody following her around, or like I'm thinking about Beauty and the Beast, and who's the bad guy? Does anybody remember?
Dawn.
What's his name?
Gaston.
Yes, Gaston. And there's the little short guy in the cartoon that follows him around and is sort of like, so he's the secondary character that is the sidekick of this antagonist, and he's complementary, so he's almost like his conscience in some way. But secondary characters need to balance against the main characters, and there needs to be a reason why they're in the book. So maybe they're providing emotional support or advice, or they're just funny, like whatever it is. Like, maybe they're just, and think about friendships in real life too. Like I think about, like, my daughter went out with some friends from high school last night, and it's like, one is a dominant friend in the group, the other one is sort of a hanger on, and then there's like the two that are sort of supporting characters, like, groups of friends like that when you're younger and stuff. And so, like, you want them to have a reason, but also to create the scene a little bit, and so the main character can think about themselves in reflection against the secondary characters, like they're teaching them something, or they're making them consider their situation. Yeah, I don't know if my daughter would like this, but thinking about a story she told me about going out last night, and this one friend from high school was like making out with a guy in the bar, and my daughter was like horrified, but because it was giving her something to think about, like, do I really want to be making out with someone in a bar? Like, not to be judging, but it was like making her consider her values and how she wanted to behave. You know what I'm saying? Not judging. Anyway, it's not a good example. The other thing is that the secondary characters can be oppositional. And so, they can undermine or question the main character. And that's part of their charm. And so the secondary characters can expand the story, expand the setting a little bit. And so they should still have a role. So when you have all these characters, just make sure that each of them adds something to the story. And if they don't, then you really, you may reconsider if you need them. So, like, in my novel that's coming out in the fall, I had this character, in the first draft, I had a character who was sort of like a teacher, and then another one who was like a mentor. And my editor said, do you think you need both? So I ended up combining them into one character who could serve both roles, and it was much cleaner. And so that was really, really good advice. So I want to just share one slide about characters, and then I can take some questions and we can move on to research. So this is also in the document that's in the drive, but I wanted to sort of go through it a little bit. But, like, your characters should, and anything you write should really reflect your interests. So nobody is holding a gun to your head to write a book. You're choosing to do this. And so make it fun, make it interesting for you. And so characters, settings, subject matter, conflict that interests you. But the characters definitely should reflect your interests. So when you think about them in depth and really creating dimensionality for them, think about, like, do you play tennis? Make a character who plays tennis. Make it fun, like something that you can really speak to. And so make that, something that's gonna be fun for you. You also want to show their setting and the way they live through detail. But remember that, what you leave out says as much as what you include. So you could describe eye color, fingernails, and height, and you don't describe hair or lipstick or whatever. And those are important things that you're choosing to show and not show. Oh, forgive me. Okay. It's also important, I think we've all read books about people who are anxious, people who are insecure, people who are looking to find themselves, people who are whiny, like there's a lot of dissatisfied characters in the world. You can create a strong character. You can create somebody who's good at what they do, who likes their job. I mean, you don't have to. I mean, they can be those characters, but think about bringing something likable, and so and they could like themselves too. They don't always have to be as flawed as we necessarily find them in a lot of books. And then you want to make them memorable. So I would encourage you to start noticing in the people in your life little quirks that you see in people around them. So maybe somebody like clears their throat a lot, or taps their fingers on the desk, or has a funny phrase that they say. That can be really fun to make up. That's like a signature detail about your character. So they say something different that's like really noteworthy, and they say it throughout the book. And that just helps them to be unique and to stand out. Finally, you want to show inner conflict in a way that is believable. So not just blatant, I don't like my life, whatever, but like, why would they doubt themselves? What would be the root of their insecurities? We all have them, but they're different in each of us. And so you want to show that inner conflict that's unique to your character, and also that they can be vulnerable, and they can show this side of themselves that builds that closeness with other characters and with the reader. And sometimes that inner voice is really important for laying this out, because they may not show it to the other characters in the book quite yet. But definitely if you're writing a romance, at some point you want your characters to be vulnerable with each other, right? Because that's what leads to love. And so you do want to have those little inner turmoils that you can reveal slowly, and that can give them depth. And then I just would say create original characters, like characters that just nobody's seen before. And there's so many different ways to show character that you could really just have fun and make stuff up and really make it unique. So that's sort of a quick little venture into the world of creating great characters. Any questions about any of that?
Yeah, I have a question. So I'm not sure who my antagonist would be.
Okay.
Because again, this is a memoir. I've lost my husband. I'm the main character. So I'm trying to figure out who that could possibly be.
Okay, so are you the main character, or is or maybe the antagonist is like loneliness?
Well,
Or
that's what I was just thinking. Is it a person really?
it may not be, but I think that there probably have been people who've stumbled across your path that have been annoyances or challenges. Like, I mean, I don't know if this would be an antagonist throughout the whole book, but like, let's say you met someone new a few years after your husband passed away, and you think, oh, maybe I'll fall in love again, and then it turns out to be a real jerk or something. Like that could be, it sounds more like a secondary character, but it could be an antagonist depending on the role through the book, or like if someone in your family is like, come on, get it together, don't be sad, and like they were really not understanding your feelings, they could be an antagonist. Because if it's like a relative and they're always in the background, you're like, oh my God, let me grieve, or you don't understand what I'm going through, like that could be an antagonist.
Could the antagonist be the grief itself?
Sure. But then I'd like you to look at it through the lens of the questionnaire about characters and see if you can develop it fully like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to think about that.
Yeah. And there could be more than one antagonist throughout the book. For a time there could be the meddling relative, like I just said. For another time, there could be, somebody else, or, it doesn't necessarily have to be one all the way through, depending on the trajectory of the story. I also invite you, Bonnie, to think about, is it just a certain period of time, or is it like your whole life? Because if in a memoir, it's really hard to write it about the whole life. And so,
It's not, it's just a little slice.
okay, perfect.
Mhm.
So yeah, because then it gives you an opportunity to do like the next book about the next phase or whatever too. But it's way easier to write it when it's a defined period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does help. Yep.
Anybody else? Okay.
I just wanted to just on to Bonnie. I like the idea of antagonists being maybe the loneliness.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Also thinking of a possibility of, at least for part of the story, that the antagonist is your husband's illness, the thing that took him.
Well, that's true too. Yeah. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but you're right, because I don't spend a lot of time in the pages I've written so far talking about the illness, but it is there.
Yeah. The other
That's a
thing that you
good
can
thought.
think about is that you don't have to write a book in the typical structure that you expect it to be. I mean, like you could do, like I mentioned my friend Nancy Sharp's book, Both Sides Now, and she has two very defined sections. There's the time when her husband is sick, and then there's the time after when she moves to Colorado with their twins. And so those are two sections, but like you could have a section, Bonnie, like a small section where you're just like maybe angry at the illness. And it's like you get to make it, like you could do something totally original in a structure that nobody has done before. And so if you wanted to like have this like, argument with the illness, I'm just making that up, but you could do that. You could have it as a
Mhm.
section, and that could be really fascinating too. So
Okay.
yeah.
Those are appreciated ideas from everybody. Thank you.
Anybody else?
But I feel like, Bonnie, that also goes to giving that illness that sense of control that we were talking about, giving the antagonist control. My mom died almost 2 years ago with brain cancer, and I felt I don't know if you felt that way, but like I felt that way towards her cancer, her diagnosis.
Mhm.
Towards there was that anger and that control, that cancer had control over her that I couldn't do anything about.
Mhm.
So I
That's
think
true.
that's a great idea, with the antagonist being the illness.
The illness itself. I'm sorry if today's a hard day for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jordan. Okay, do you guys want to take a 5-minute break to stretch and then we'll get into research, or do you want to just power through?
I'm good either way.
All right, let's power through. And then if you want to get up, just let me know and we can take a little pause. Okay, so research and credibility is really important and I'm going to actually share my screen for this. In anything that you're writing, there ends up being research, even when it's your own story. Maybe it's looking at journal pages, or like did anybody read Tara Westover's memoir, Educated? Anybody read
Mhm.
that?
Yes.
Phenomenal. And I can't imagine how she would have written it if she didn't keep all those journals. Like, thank God she did, because she could put us in the moment of some of her childhood so vividly because she kept journals the whole time. So that's a form of research, or looking through photo albums, talking to relatives if you're dealing with a memoir. If it's nonfiction of some sort, maybe you're researching a certain discipline or a certain field of study, or looking at the history of whatever the field is, and putting that context in there. For novels, the research that you want to do might be about setting or place or time. It's funny to me that my childhood is now considered historical fiction, but it's like I always feel like historical. My daughter and I had a conversation about this the other day, and she said, "So you think historical fiction is anything before you were born?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Okay, so I think the same," which means, Mom, your life is historical fiction for me. And I'm like, touche, that's true. But like, even though I lived in the 70s and 80s, I mean, I was a little kid. So I have to go back and I have to research things. And even like in my next novel, it's taking place between 2014 and 2016 in partially in Scotland, partially in Michigan. So when I'm like writing a scene and they're at the pub and they're ordering a beer in, you know, in a small town in Scotland, I have to research what beers were popular in 2014 in Edinburgh because I want to be accurate. And so research is so important to making your book credible, whatever your genre is. And so it doesn't mean that I don't want this to paralyze you and make you feel like, oh my God, this makes it even harder. To be fair, there are times when I'm writing that I like when I'm in the midst of a chapter and I'm like, oh, I need to know the beer they would drink in 2014. And I'll just do a Google search and I'll find some things. Luckily, we have that at our disposal nowadays. But there are other times where I'm in the flow of writing and I'm like, well, I'm going to need to do the research about the landscape. I'll type in all caps, research this, so that when I go back through to revise, it reminds me that I need to go in and do the research. So don't let it stifle your ability to write. Just know that it is a companion to your writing to be able to look up information and give depth to what you're doing. Okay. So with that said, you want to pursue this material from credible sources. And I've listed a few of them here. Some sources that you may not even be aware exist, like historians or archives. My husband actually is an archivist, and he curates, he decides what you keep and what you throw out. And so you can find photographs and documents and letters pretty much for everything in the world at some archive or another. And luckily, in this day and age, a lot of them are digitized and you can find them from the convenience of your own home. So like I'm leaving on Thursday to go to the UK, and that is a trip to research for this novel that I'm writing, the next one. But the archives that I wanted to visit are not even open on the days that I'm there. So a lot of it can be online, which is great. And I might have to go back and, you know, if I really need that material, when they're open. So just know that that is available to you. But sometimes people look at maps as a way of history, or I just interviewed someone for my podcast. I host the Make Meaning podcast and I feature authors and people in publishing. And I just interviewed a woman named Ana Veciana Suarez. She's a journalist in Florida, and she has a book that just came out like a week ago called Dulcinea, and it's really amazing. But it's a novel, it's a historical novel based on a character in Don Quixote, and she imagines what her life really was like, and she sort of recreates it. But this is like, you know, in Spain in like the 16th century. And so she read a ton of books about that time and books about Don Quixote, and, you know, so like to give her some background for the story she wanted to write, even though she's making it up. So just know that all of these and more are definitely credible sources. When you are Googling online, you just want to be, and you guys probably all know this, when I teach university classes, I can't emphasize enough, you can't just take everything you find online as the truth. So you want to make sure that you're not finding information that some guy in his mother's basement is putting up there and it doesn't have any factual basis to it. So it's good if you can like trace back the whatever material you find to, you know, a real place like a university or a foundation or something that has credentials of some sort. You also can see what's already been written about time or place or, you know, characters or whatever. In Wikipedia pages, when you do your research, at the bottom, all of their sources could be great resources for you, for your research. And also finding statistics and surveys, especially for nonfiction writing, is super helpful. It adds a lot of credibility, but just from a credible institution or research body. And then finally, there is this notion of primary versus secondary research. And primary is like from the horse's mouth, directly from the source. And secondary would be like a historian who is an expert in this particular era, but they're sort of the bridge between you and the actual information. And so, you know, there's benefits to both, but just know that the primary documents are usually way more powerful than the secondary because they've been interpreted by the expert. Any questions about sources and how to find research and information for what you're looking for? Anything that specifically relates to your books? Anybody? Okay. The other thing I would say about research is to find a way to keep it organized. So, I mean, I just use Microsoft Word. I have students who use Scrivener, which is a platform that a lot of writers swear by, and there are others out there. And it's a helpful little tool to keep all of your material together. I just am happy with my little Microsoft Word documents. But I do have folders in my Dropbox, which is my storage online, and I will have, subfolders and folders and saying, like this is the research for this and this is the research for that, just so I can always find it. And I also, because I'm such an impatient person, I don't want to go down a well with research and get lost and never get back to writing. So I'll give myself a strict parameter of like, I'll spend 2 hours today researching. That's all I'm going to do, and then I keep to it because I don't want to lose out on my writing time, right? Because you could spend weeks, months, years researching. Like my friend that I just mentioned to you guys, who wrote Dulcinea, she said it takes her like 5 to 7 years to write one of these books. And like, I'm too impatient. I don't want to take that much time. So, and she said, I probably read too many books. I probably did too much research. And so just know that you can and should set limits and stick to them so that you can get back to the writing, because the writing is really, what you hopefully love about it, Another way to do research is, if you can, to visit the place that you're setting your story in. So, or if the person still exists, talk to them. I mean, that's called primary research. But, when you can visit an actual site and take notes about it, which is what I'm doing in the next week, it comes to life. It's just great, So like, part of my next novel takes place in Loch Lomond in Scotland, and I haven't been to that part of Scotland. And so I'm doing some hiking, and I just am taking a journal, and I'm just noticing. I'm just going to notice, because I've done all of the concrete research about the lake, about the mountains, but I need to be there to smell the air, to hear the sounds, and to take the notes. And that will just round out the story even more. So I'm grateful that I can do that, because we can't always, but if you can, it's super, super important to spend some time on that. So I want to share with you a resource that is in the Drive, and this is in the week 4 subfolder. So there is a writer's research plan that could help guide you in doing this research. And so you might want to start here. And so when you sit down to write, or even when you're thinking of an idea, you could start answering these questions like, well, where does it take place? And again, it's place, landscape, time frame, whatever. And then answer these questions like, how much do you already know about it? And what is missing from your knowledge base? Like I know the location, but I don't know what the air smells like, or, I've never been there and I'm just curious about it, or I've done a deep dive on the internet, but I don't have any firsthand knowledge, so whatever that is. And it just helps to guide your research and helps to structure what do you really need to find versus getting lost in rabbit hole searches. And then after setting, there's character. And I've put it here for 4, but you can always copy and paste and do even more. But just sort of trying to outline your characters. And this is a nice companion to the week 3 materials, but thinking about, what profession does your character have? What, strata of society do they live in? And like, do you know as much as you need to about those things? So if you have somebody who's an accountant and you're really bad at math, you might want to research the accounting field, or if somebody is living in poverty and you've been very fortunate in your life, you might want to research it, and just see what will be realistic here. Another thing I want to mention actually about this is that when you are writing characters that are not you, it's important to be sensitive to bias and to do your due diligence so that you aren't writing in tropes. And there is something called the sensitivity reader that some people will hire to take a look through your book and make sure you're not, saying things that could be sexist or racist or ageist or whatever. And that's a personal preference if that's something you want to do, but people are becoming more and more aware of the fact that, we sometimes write with our biases because we don't even realize what our biases are. So even somebody was saying using the word paralyzed can be ableist, and maybe we don't want to use that because it has a derogatory nature to it. It's a preference, but it's just something to be aware of, that one of the in my book that I'm writing, there's two characters who are gay, and I'm making sure, and I'm straight, that I am writing it appropriately and with sensitivity. So these are believable characters, but not in any way fulfilling tropes or, biases of any sort. So it's just really important to be aware of that as well. And then on this worksheet, it's important to understand what is in the same realm of what you're writing. And actually, this is helpful if you want to be going the traditional publishing route and pitching agents and publishers, because you're going to want to say what your comps are, comparable titles to your book, so that they can picture where it would be on the shelf. And we'll talk more about that in coming weeks. But it's important to look at, what else has been written about this or like this. And maybe I should check out some of them and see what I like and what I don't like, and make sure that mine is unique, So there are no new stories, only new ways to approach them. And I think it's good to know what else is out there that's similar to what you're doing. Or, think about if there are Civil War stories, there might be thousands of books about the Civil War. And if you're writing one, wouldn't it be good to know what's out there and maybe see how you can make yours original or unique in some way? So I think it's good, and you don't have to do all of these, but I just wanted to give enough space for it. What other books have been written about this time frame, this subject matter, this focus, so that you can understand what's already been done and how you want to come at it differently and uniquely. And just like your author questionnaire in the first week, there is sort of a fill in the blank research plan. So what are you going to do? Are you going to devote 20 minutes a week or an hour a week or whatever to doing some research, and how can you do this efficiently? And so, just sort of walking through how you're going to stay organized, what overwhelms you, and then if it gets to be too much, what are you going to do? So are you going to post in the WhatsApp group and say, hey guys, I'm snowed under with my research. I don't know how to dig myself out. Who can help? Can I get on a call with someone? Or are you going to, ask your best friend to help? Or what are you going to do? And we can come up with some ideas for that too. And then again, also thinking, if I need accountability, if I'm procrastinating and I'm not getting this done, who am I going to contact? And I encourage you guys to use the WhatsApp group for that, and each other and me, to say, hey, when it gets to be too much, I need you to give me a little pep talk or something. That's what we're here for. That's what this class is all about. So this is a great little tool that can help you at least start to figure out what you need to know to write your book the way you want to write it, and break it down into chunks. So are you seeing a theme at all about, making it into manageable chunks so that nothing is overwhelming? All of writing a book is about doing it one step at a time, and never saying I'm here today with a blank screen and oh my God, 300 pages. I don't know how to get there. Nope, that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at page 1 and then page 2. Research one day, then the second day. If I had to research all at once for my book, I probably wouldn't write the book. So it's just, how do we make it manageable? How do we get those chunks into bite size so that we can really do them? What questions do you have about research, about characters, about anything we've talked about? Or if somebody wants some coaching on any of this, we can do that too.
If you put a direct quote from another author, as long as you credit them, do you need to also get permission from that person? Or
yeah. So it depends how much. So if it's, I think the rule, and you're going to want to check this out, is 3 lines on a page. Then you can just quote from the book, and you would, put it in quotation marks, and you could footnote it. You could just reference it, attribute it in the body of the writing. If it's, I don't know how much of an excerpt do you have to ask for permission? So I can look that up and get back to you on that. But after a certain amount, you do have to request permission because you're reprinting it, and you'd have to reference it in some way. But I don't know that length.
Okay, thank you.
Now, if you paraphrase it, which means put it in your own words, then you can just say, inspired by Joe Smith, da 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 da, or like you can just sort of paraphrase, and then you skirt those issues. Yeah. Other questions?
Not a question as much as a comment. I just want to say that, last week there were a few people that were on the WhatsApp and we were just kind of back and forth with somebody had a question. And I just thought that was so helpful because we don't always know what, like I might be thinking one thing and, just having input from other people is just really valuable. And you learn from what other people are asking too.
Yeah. So I will keep the WhatsApp group going even after the class ends. And
Oh, great.
you can also make relationships with each other. Feedback. I'm not sure why. But anyway, you can decide if somebody in the class seems to fit you, then you could say, hey, can we critique each other or be accountable to each other outside of class too? Yeah. Rachel, yes.
Yeah. So my idea for my book has like changed as I've started writing it. And I just want to make sure like right now that not like it feels like I have a lot going on. So my main character becomes sober, and like the opening scene is basically like her puking in front of her kids and being super hungover and like what is my life, and then she kind of realizes like I'm going to take a break from alcohol, like a summer off, and then whatever, and then her best friend really like judges her, looks down on her for this decision. Her life is kind of spiraling because of her own drinking. And then so Henley is my main character. I name my characters after my favorite students. So Henley is one of my all-time favorite students. Anyways, and it's a sweet name. So Henley and Reese. Henley kind of in the beginning of the story, she becomes sober. And it's gonna go through her first year of sobriety and how like life changes. And like in the end, she has these two daughters. And then in the end, she's going to be like pregnant, and like I get a second chance at really doing motherhood and enjoying every stage of it without drinking. And like, this is my redemption, like to have another baby. And like in the end.
Great.
And then Reese is like spiraling. Her life is kind of out of control. And I want this to happen in my story, but I don't know if it's too much. But where Reese wakes up one morning, she's super hungover and she can't get her kids to daycare. So she's like, honey, to her husband, who they have a like very tumultuous marriage because of her drinking and other situations, things going on. Like he's, on Instagram a lot, liking influence naked pictures of girls and like Instagram, like, looking to that for kind of like validation, whatever. Anyway. So she's going to take them to daycare because she can't get out of bed. She's so hungover, and drop them off. And it's horrible, but I want him to die, like in a car accident, because she couldn't get out of bed. And then like that completely unravels her life, because maybe she would have gotten up. Is that too much in a story? It seems like a lot. And I'm like, okay.
Why would it be too much?
It just seems like a lot, but it's not unrealistic because, I live in Lake Orion, and one of my friends, her husband, like it wasn't the same situation, but dropped his son off at school. And then it was like a bad day outside, and a car like slid into a sign, and the sign like impaled him. And died like just minutes after dropping his son off from daycare. And I'm like, that's stuff that happens, and it's tragic. I also want it to be sort of like Reese's fault for not being not her fault. It's not her fault, but maybe if she would have gotten out of bed, if she would have drank that night, like if she could have taken the kids to school on time, maybe that wouldn't have happened to her husband. And then like that sends her into a spiral. I don't know. It seems like a lot.
You know what? I would trust your instincts. And if you think it seems like a lot, like maybe do it and then see how you feel. Read it and see what you think. I think I texted you guys after the first class session about that, the show on PBS, Tom Jones, which is based on a book, which I haven't read. And so much happens in that first episode. Like, I can't even tell you, like I can't even enumerate it all, but there's like, so they start and there's like, this is in like 1800s aristocratic England, and they live in these estates. And by the end of the episode, the two main characters have been like, one has run away to avoid a terrible marriage, and the other one has been cast out. But it starts and they're like, everyone's so happy and everyone has and it's like, whoa, what has happened from start to, and that's the first episode, the first chapter. So I don't think it's too much. And one thing to remember in any book is you need to keep the pace going. You need to keep the story unfolding. It can't be, I hate this word, lollygagging. Like, you can't just be like, la la la, life is good. Like, things have to happen. And so, yeah, let him die and see what happens. And maybe is that what, is that rock bottom for Reese, or does she go even lower? And, is Henley there for her? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and then she's not in return. I think it could be a real, it could be just a real device in the story to sort of pivot around for their relationship too. So yeah, I think so. Why not?
He wasn't gonna die. It was gonna be Reese gets in a drinking and driving like accident with her kids in the car. But I think, but I think transitioning to something more tragic. I know it's like awful, but I think it would be more, more like, I don't know,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I don't know.
In the book, my book that's coming out in September, there's a lot that happens. There's adultery, there's abuse at a school, there's all kinds of stuff. And there was, in the first draft that I wrote this, the husband gets leukemia, and then as I read it, I'm like, I don't want him to get leukemia. This is too much. Like, so no, he doesn't. He's fine. But like, I had to write it to see, and then I was like, yeah, this is too depressing, and it doesn't fit for the story, and so I need to go back. And so the only thing you can do is try it and see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Have you read The Friendship Breakup by Annie Catherine?
It's on my research list. So
Okay.
I just looked on Libby, but I think it's too new to be on Libby yet.
No, I don't know that one.
Libby, like the audio through the library.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a book title.
No, the Libby app.
Yeah.
So I just looked that up, but I told my book club about my book idea, and she sent me, my friend Alyssa sent me one that's called Before I Let You Go.
Okay.
And it's like a similar storyline. So I'm going to read that one, and then I'll probably read The Friendship Breakup just to help guide me in my research.
Annie's a good friend of mine, and it's an amazing story. And I just think there's some similarities. So yeah, it would be worth checking out. Yeah. Other questions? Research, characters, anything else?
Lynn, the book that you mentioned called Both Sides Now, who's the author of that?
Nancy Sharp.
Sharp, thank you.
Oh, 1 second. Jordan, I was like in my office talking about your story. And someone, the prostitute one, like, cause I was so like, oh my God, it's gonna be a great book. Someone told me there's a Criminal Minds episode. That's not, it's kind of along those lines. So I would just check it out. It's like, sort of like that. Some of my coworkers are big Criminal Minds fans. And so they're like, that sounds like a similar storyline, but not the same. But it had like a dad and a prostitute in it. So I would just check that Criminal Minds episode out if you get a chance.
I will. Thank you. Because I don't watch Criminal Minds. I watch Law and Order SVU. I'm all about that. But I actually have never seen Criminal Minds. So I'll check that out. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions, or does anybody want to talk about their project and get a little coaching? Anything at all? So in coming weeks, we will be talking about revision and how to do it, when to do it, all of that. So that'll be the week we come back. And then also talking about when you share your work and when do you get feedback from others. So revision is something that you'll do, yourself, but then how do you decide who to show this to and when and what kind of feedback you really want. And then in the final weeks, we'll talk about publishing, all the different ways that you can publish and how to write query letters and all that kind of stuff. And the final week, I like to sort of send everybody off and say, okay, what's next? Now that we're not meeting anymore, how are you going to keep on the straight and narrow and get your book done? So that'll be the final week. So anything else about writing a book that isn't covered in sort of this format that you want me to address?
I have a question that goes back to a term you used last week. You used the term self-sabotage.
Huh?
And I found that really helpful because it is exactly what I'm doing when I'm, vacuuming instead of writing,
Yeah.
So, and then I shared today that one of my, a deep tendency when I get into looking over what I've written is to go way too down to the apostrophe level.
Yeah.
And so do you have any advice for sort of how to keep myself at at a sort of a higher distance or looking through a wider lens rather than going into this perfectionistic, I'll end up sitting there for an hour and I realize I've worked on 2 sentences,
Sure.
and I don't feel like I accomplished anything. So it's just a habit, and I think it is a habit of self-sabotage and fear in the sense that, oh, if I just pay attention to the apostrophe, I don't have to think about,
Yep.
7
Yeah.
paragraphs, so do you have any thoughts about that?
I do. Yeah, these are really great questions, Lisa. And you're not alone. You're not the only one who does this. So be assured in that regard. So there's a couple of things. The first task in writing a book is just to write. And like we said earlier in the call, the first draft is messy. It's almost always messy. It's imperfect. I've had people write first drafts where they screw up the characters' names. So it's like Betty on page 1 and it's Bobby on page 30, and like that's okay. Like it's messy. And so the first piece of advice is just to write the damn thing. Just to write and not look back. Like don't, and this is where, like I said, I was always a pantser, but I forced myself to be a plotter because I didn't want to have to start by rereading the last day's work in order to know where I was going. If I have my outline, I know where I left off and I've written it down. And so I don't have to go back, because if I go back, I'm going to edit and I'm going to critique and I'm going to feel bad. So I don't want to go back. I just want to get the stuff on the page. And then once you have the first draft done, that's when you go through and you play with the commas and the apostrophes and that kind of thing. However, punctuation and grammar is not that important, because hopefully, no matter how you publish, you will have a proofreader who will do that for you. So even if you self-publish, it's a great investment to hire somebody for just a few $100s who can go through it and make all those changes. So it never has to be your job as writer to know if the apostrophe is in the right place. It never has to be, because you will have other people who can do that for you. Even if it's a friend who's critiquing it. So that's another thing.
I obsess on it. I mean, I know that I don't have to worry about the apostrophe, but
Right.
I go there likely as a way of avoiding a bigger picture that's scarier to look at.
Right. And so there's a couple things you can do to sort of talk yourself out of that. So one of the things is you can write this book and nobody ever has to see it. So like just writing it does not mean the next step is the whole world hates me and I'm a failure. It's just you're writing it. And then you could have a finished product and be like, okay, I did it, check it off. I don't want to put it in the world. Like you get to decide that. So that's one thing that's reassuring. Another thing is to, sort of reward yourself every time you do something positive instead of punish yourself every time you do something negative. So if you say, I'm going to write for 30 minutes a day, each day that you do that, maybe you put $1 in a jar or you put a $5 bill in a jar or whatever you do. And then when it gets to a certain amount, you are buying yourself that shirt you wanted, or you're going to get a massage, or you're going to the fancy restaurant that you never go to because it's not in the budget, but because you've put the money in the jar, now you've done it. And it's going to take you, 120 days or 120 hours of writing or whatever before you can go to that restaurant. And you're like, I really want to go. And so come up with ways to reward yourself, even if it's like a walk in the woods. It doesn't have to cost anything. Or like you're binging a show or something. Like if you reinforce the positive behavior, then hopefully you trick yourself into doing more of it than reinforcing the negative behavior. So which is also, it's just a reflex. So we all do it. It's not like there's anything wrong with you. It's very, very common, but it's just fear. And one of my grad school professors used to say, there's a professor on your shoulder. That was how he talked about them, who's like critiquing, like, oh, you got the comma in the wrong place. Oh, you didn't, that's not a good sentence. Oh, like, your grammar isn't right. And he was saying, you got to knock the professor off the shoulder, like kick him off, or like, thank you very much. I'll come to you when I'm ready for you. But that professor doesn't need to be on your shoulder when you're just writing. So however you can come up with a plan, and it can be as easy as possible to make yourself feel good when you get the writing done. Hopefully you'll do more of that instead of the distractions. I don't know if that'll work or not, but it's worth a try, right?
It's really helpful. In my situation, I have done so much writing and I wished I had thought to outline it in advance, but it's too late for all that. So sometimes
Nope. It's not. Tons of book coaches.
And outline something, or should I find out what I've got and fit it into an outline?
You could go through so I know tons of book coaches who, when they start to work with a client who might even have a manuscript done, they ask them to create an outline for the book, even though it's done, just to see. And it could even be like from your memory, from your gut, like about this is what the book needs to be. You create that outline, and then you see if you have the pieces. And if you don't, you see what you have to fill in, which actually will make the job a lot easier too. Because you're like, oh, great, it's 12 chapters. I already have 6 of them done. Cool, I only have to do 6, I did this with a client who has been writing a novel for it's a thriller for 10 years. And in between work and college, and she's younger. And she doesn't have it in any order. She just sort of writes, and then she's planning to stitch together the manuscript. And I know famous writers who do this, and it sounds terrifying to me, but it's like a quilt. It's like you do each patch, and then you decide how they're going to lay out on the fabric. But I think it's important to go through, and this client and I, we went through and we outlined the story. We did a beat sheet together over the course of a month, and we sort of said, okay, well, who are the characters? What happens? What's the outcome? Like, what are those points in the story? And then she went back to see everything she'd written, to see what fits in where and what she needs to create. It can actually be really freeing to do that, but I wouldn't do the outline based on what you have. I would do the outline based on what you think you need, and then see what you have that fits into it.
Okay.
Yeah. And just try to use the nonfiction beat sheet if you can. Or even just the outline that I sent you, which is a lot more simple, but might be all you need. Like, what is each chapter about? Like, what is the process of what you're trying to teach from start to finish? And what does each chapter have to have? Are there worksheets? Are there, I don't know what, surveys, quizzes, in what order? And then see what you have and plug it in.
Whew, okay.
You can do this, Lisa. You know this so well. You've been writing it for so long. I bet it would be really freeing to try it.
Yep.
Let me know how it goes. I want to hear in the WhatsApp. Other questions?
I do have a question, and it is way in the future, but how much in ballpark does it cost for editor, publishing, all that stuff?
Sure. So we are going to get into publishing options in weeks to come, but there's traditional publishing, there's hybrid publishing, and there is self-publishing. And there are costs to all of them. And so we'll go into it at length when we get to that. But if you are, no matter how you're going, I always suggest that people do, they get feedback from other people, whether it's a critique group or beta readers, or they hire an editor or a combination of those. And developmental editors, again, we'll go through all this as well, but developmental editors look at your big picture story, what works, what doesn't, what questions they have. They don't actually touch the manuscript, they read it, and they give you lots of feedback. And they charge anywhere from, I want to say like 3 cents a word to 12 cents a word. And some of them do by the hour. So the one that I hired charged $75 an hour. But then when people come back to her, she gives like a 10% discount or something. So so it just depends. And so it depends how long it's going to take them to read it and, you know, that kind of thing. Then there's copy editors, line editors, and proofreaders. And copy editors and line editors, honestly, I think they're the same thing. There might be a difference, but it's where they go through and they do line by line. And so not only like the commas and stuff, but like the concept. So like, you know, you need an active verb, or, you know, who's the subject in this, or like really in detail. When I do a developmental edit, I do both what I described for developmental edit and line editing. I go through the whole manuscript and I put comments and I do all kinds of edits. And I charge 7 cents a word, but I always give 10% to my returning students, 10% discount. So like it's that minus the 10%. And the proofreading is at the very last step where you have somebody take another look at it and make sure everything looks good. I think I paid like $400 for the proofread for my novel, and it was amazing. She did a great job. So there's lots of people out there, and I can always give you recommendations too.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Anybody? No? All right. If you don't have any other questions, that is the content for this week, for the 2 weeks. If there's anything else you would like me to spend time on today, I'd be happy to, because we have still 25 minutes. If not, I can say enjoy the rest of your Sunday. So what would you guys like to do with the time?
I feel like I've talked and asked and learned a lot. So I'm good, but I'm also very interested to listen if anyone else wants to stick around and go more into their project.
Yeah.
I think I'm good with where I am right now.
Yeah. So maybe use the next 25 minutes to do the outline, Lisa, because, you know, it was marked off anyway, right? And then be like, hey, Lynn, I just did it in 25 minutes. Cool. Yay. I'm just saying, just an idea. If you guys have additional questions, I'm here. I'm happy to answer them. Please send them to me, and I will be excited to see you guys next on June 4th. But in the meantime, I will be out all over WhatsApp. So please send me your questions, your successes, your challenges. We can all be there for each other. And yeah, I'd love to hear. So keep me posted, okay?
Okay.
All right. Happy
Sounds
Sunday.
good.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
See you soon.
Thank you. It was
care.
great.
Careful
Great
on your
class. Thanks
internet.
for your help.
Thanks. Bye.